Hello again and welcome everyone. This is Mike. I am the founder and CEO of SuiteDash. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this video, which is about automation concepts. So in this first principles video series, we've covered the portal overview, the CRM concepts, forms and function, dashboards and pages and custom menus, and these are key players in the platform functionality, but automation is really where the platform shines. Because as an all-in-one platform, we have all the ingredients in the same place. So we have all the data, all the functionality, all the trigger points, all the interaction. Everything happens inside one platform, and therefore actions taken in one toolkit by a staff member or a target can trigger actions or reactions or data changes in another toolkit in the same platform. So let's take a look at the topics that we'll cover, what I call here the heroes of automation and the givers of #SuiteFreedom. So let's take a look. So we'll start by explaining what automation opportunities are and what a target is and how they play together. Then we'll move to the concept of generators and the functionality that they provide. We'll explain what a based on date is and then what a relative date is and how they work. Then we'll look at auto templates, which is a way of pre-defining or pre-creating automations and then triggering them based on some condition or manual action by your staff, for example. We'll talk about a subject that we touched on a little bit in the custom menus video, which is the ability to trigger auto templates by a simple click of a button or a link. And then we'll discuss the dynamic logic engine and how cool that is and how that works. And finally, we'll look at scheduled automations and make sure you understand how those work and what the concept is there. All right, so this is exciting because a lot of these concepts just don't exist in other software. Automations, yes, but the infrastructure and machinery that we have designed and created is quite unique and extremely powerful. So let's get started. Okay, so first what we're going to talk about is automation opportunities and then what a target is. So an automation opportunity is the term that we use for any place in the platform that you can set automations to be triggered. So whether that is when an invoice is paid, or when a proposal is approved, or when a document is signed, those are just examples, but there are dozens of places in the platform that you can configure automations that will be fired when they are triggered by the completion of that particular event. But understand that when we create these automations, we know everything about what is going to be done in the automation except for who the target is. So our tools are designed so that they have all the data and all the instructions that they need to execute. The only thing that they lack is who is the target. That's the variable. And that's why they can be used over and over and over again. You can run hundreds of targets through the automation workflow, and the automation will execute exactly the same every time, but it will be unique to that particular target based on their unique data. So that's an introduction explanation, but let's keep going. It'll become more clear. So the graphic you see here represents a typical workflow. And at each one of these map markers, we'll call these automation opportunities. And each car that goes down this road is a target. So each one of these cars is an individual person or company that is working its way through your workflow. And as they pass each one of these automation opportunity events, when they complete that event or it's marked complete by your staff, for example, the automations that are configured there at that opportunity will be fired. The automations have already been configured, but they will use the unique data of the target that is at that particular map marker at that particular moment, fire the automations in reference to that target data, and that's it. And then when the next target gets to that automation opportunity and completes that event, those automations will fire using that target's data. For example, if one of the automations was configured to create a proposal using a proposal generator, and in that proposal generator were data placeholders for first name, last name, simple things like that, or complex things that you can create, as each target comes through that automation, the automation will fire, the proposal will be generated, but it will use each target's data individually as it generates a proposal for target A, or for target B, or for target C. And target A's first name, last name will be correct in his proposal, and separately there will be a different proposal generated for target B, and her first name and last name will be correct, and separately there will be another proposal generated for target C, and the first name and last name will be correct for target C, and so on and so on. And so this gives us the ability to create a generic workflow that will work for hundreds of targets individually and uniquely as you pass them through this automation workflow or funnel, or however you want to describe it. Pretty cool stuff. So let's keep going, and we'll make sure that it becomes more and more clear as we go. All right, so now let's move into some of the building blocks of these automations. And one of the most important of these is what we call generators. So you will see in the platform that there are event generators, there are proposal generators, there are project generators, invoice generators of various types. And what generators do is they allow you to pre-configure what the resulting product will look like based on your specifications, and then they wait to create that end product until they are instructed to do so by you manually or by an automation. So I like to compare them to a factory. Think about a Toyota car factory. It makes a specific model of a Toyota car based on very specific instructions. It has an assembly line that's exactly configured to make this specific type of car, and based on the specification, those cars will roll out the end of the factory and be ready. So a generator works the same way. When you create and configure a generator, you're telling the platform, I want you to create an end product that looks like this. And again, the only thing that is missing, the only variable that we don't know and we don't set is the target, because we want to use this generator in an automation. And as the target goes through the automation, we'll say, all right, proposal generator, I want you to use proposal generator XXX, which I know is fully defined and appropriate for this situation. And I want you to generate a proposal using that specific proposal generator for target A. And at that moment, the factory will spin up and turn on. It will create in milliseconds a proposal according to the specifications, and out from the end of the assembly line will come a proposal specifically and uniquely tailored for target A. And then that proposal will appear in the list of proposals, and it's an actual proposal that's ready to go. So understand that a proposal generator is not a proposal. It's a factory that creates proposals, and the resulting end product is a proposal, but that is not achieved until a proposal generator is created, and then it's combined with a target in an automation or manually triggered for that target specifically. Now you can manually create proposals and skip the whole generator process if you want. If you need to do that, that's great. And there are times when that's appropriate. But we're talking about automation here. So the generator is a key player in that automation, and it's one of the key elements that you'll use to predefine, pre-create automation workflows that we can run hundreds of targets through and get the same result, but uniquely adapted to each specific target as they progress through that workflow. Okay, so let's move on to the next concept, and that is based on date and relative dates. So let's start with the most basic logic, and that is something that almost everyone is familiar with, and that's a drip campaign or an autoresponder. And as you know, the way that these work is you create a series of emails that are sent at a specified interval after your target signs up for that email list or audience or whatever you call it so that you understand. So this is very common and been around for decades. But the thing to focus on is that the timing where these emails are sent, you set in each email, and you say, 7 days after they sign up, or 10 days or 14 days after they sign up, send this email or that email. And those sending events are relative to the date that they are added to the list. So if they're added on January 1st, then in this example, the first one will be sent on January the 8th, and the 11th, and the 15th, as you see. And no matter when they're added, email sending events will be relative to the date that they are added. So in this example, the date that they are added to the list becomes the based on date. As you see here, let's just say it's the 15th, and the email sending events that are pre-created are designed around what are called relative dates. So in this example, not the first, now we're on the 15th. The 15th becomes the based on date, and the relative dates indicate that the email sending events will happen on the 22nd, the 25th, and the 29th. Okay, so that's pretty simple to understand. You have the based on date, and then you have relative dates. But what if the based on date could be set differently than just a sign up event, and it happens always right now in the present when a subscriber signs up for a list, for example? What if we can move the based on date around, maybe even into the future, right? Maybe we can move a based on date into the future 2 months or 3 months or whatever date we decided out in the future. And then what if we could have negative relative dates? That means that if we set an event out into the future, say a conference or a wedding or an important tax due date, if we use that as our based on date, then we can create both negative relative date events and positive relative date events. So let's just talk in terms of a wedding. So if we set the date of the wedding out to June 15th, we'll say, then we may want to trigger emails or some other actions in the days that lead up to the wedding. Maybe reminders to our staff, maybe emails to the wedding party, maybe automations to trigger some other events. So we can do that by having a based on date in the future, June 15th, and then using relative dates, which are negative, to trigger events that happen before the based on date. And then we can also use positive relative dates to trigger events that happen after the based on date, maybe follow-ups or review requests or whatever else is appropriate. And here's a little hint, we can do this. Okay, so let's keep going. So now you can see that the based on date could be the 1st of the month, it could be the 15th of the month, it could be the 28th of the month, but that doesn't change the structure that you build. So this top construction that you see here with the negative and positive relative dates, that stays the same. We define that and we package that up, and then we can set it down on top of any one of these triangles, meaning any one of these based on dates, and it will function exactly the same relative to that based on date. So it doesn't matter where we put it. We can move it out into the future 1 month, we can move it out 2 months, 3 months, it won't matter. It's a replicatable process that can adapt to whatever we need in terms of a based on date. So now look down at the bottom, you see that the based on date could be a variable, right? So it could be the date of generation, meaning the date that we trigger the appropriate automation, in which case negative relative dates don't make sense, but you would know that and you would build your automations in the right way. Or the variable could be the value of a custom field. And understand that this means that maybe in our workflow, the first thing that we ask for in the workflow, we use a form to ask the wedding date. What's the wedding date? So as they're onboarding, they tell us the wedding date. They tell us it's June 15th. We store that in the value of a custom field. And later in the workflow, we trigger a project generator or some other mechanism that uses the value of that custom field as the based on date, and then applies to that based on date our pre-built structure with relative dates, our replicatable system that is now based around June 15th, because that's what they told us when they onboarded. And understand that this can be replicated over and over and over again. Each time a new wedding party fills out that form, they say, oh, it's on November 11th, or oh, it's on July 4th. Doesn't matter, because the based on date will be fed to the mechanism, and the same replicatable process will be executed around that based on date because it's using relative dates to do so. And a good example of this is a task template. So a task template is used in project management. Using automations, you can create a project using a task template, which is a predefined set of tasks. And when you are predefining them, you configure the due date of each task using a relative number. And of course, that's relative to the based on date. So in our wedding example, the based on date was populated by the value of a custom field that the wedding party gave us the wedding date in a form earlier in the process. Then later in the workflow, we use a project generator which identifies the task template, and then the tasks are automatically created inside the project, and the due dates are set relative to the based on date, which we know is June 15th. And so in this example, you could auto-generate a project with all the tasks that need to be done before the wedding, automatically generated immediately with proper due dates as is appropriate as the wedding gets closer, and automatically generate a bunch of tasks that are set with due dates that are after the wedding for follow-ups or whatever else you need. And you can build this entire system so that it can be replicated over and over, each time uniquely around the based on date that was provided earlier in your workflow. All right, so I think you're starting to understand the power of these mechanisms and how they can be used to create replicatable systems and processes that can save you tons of time, make your business more efficient and therefore more profitable. All right, so let's move on to a new concept, and now let's talk about auto templates. So auto templates are a series of automations that are grouped together into a package, a single package, that can be triggered either manually or by a logic trigger. And when triggered, all the automations packaged in that auto template are fired at that moment. So as you can see here, you create an auto template, you give it a reference name, something that you can reference in your automations or your staff can reference. And it can consist of individual automations like send email to this or that staff, send email to the target separately, remove them from circle A and add them to circle B, which we have seen can then change their entire experience, including menus and access, etc. Maybe you want to trigger a project generator, and then any other automations you define. There's no limit to how many you can add here. And the idea is that you configure these automations to do as much work as possible at this point in your workflow. And then when this auto template is triggered, all of these automations happen in milliseconds as opposed to the 20, 30, 40 minutes it might take you to process this manually. Keep in mind that just like the rest of our automation tools, everything here is defined except for that one variable, which is the target. So the way these auto templates are triggered means it must have a target. Let's look at that. What you're seeing here is a CRM contact dashboard, and we're demonstrating here how fast it is to access the auto template functionality. So let's say you just had a phone call or you received an email from one of your clients, and they decided on a specific package of services. And you have defined an auto template that is configured to perform a series of automations that instantly start someone down that workflow for that package of services. Maybe adds them to a circle, kicks off a project, sends them a document for signing, sends emails to certain staff members. All that is in that one auto template package. So when you or your staff get off the phone with this client, all you have to do is navigate to their CRM dashboard and click 1, 2, 3, and within 3 clicks you can select that specific auto template that's appropriate for this scenario and trigger it, thereby firing all of those automations in one go, and that's it. You're done. The platform takes care of the rest, and the work that you put into designing that auto template is executed immediately. And the beauty is that this is a replicatable process. So not only are you saving an enormous amount of time on this first go, but every time this happens in your business, you're going to save an enormous amount of time. And for every process or set of actions that you can configure into something like this auto template, you can save enormous amounts of time. When human decision points lead to action, those actions can then be triggered by you or your staff using an auto template to execute all the necessary actions that follow for that scenario that you or your staff have identified. Another way auto templates can be triggered is the click to trigger functionality that we discussed previously in the custom menus video. So just like we saw before, you have a menu item that you can add, or these options can also be accessed via the button block in the content block editor and any link action that you make in the content block editor. So a working example might be that you present a portal page or dashboard to a target in a certain place in a workflow, and you provide them option A, option B, and option C. And to make the choice, you provide 3 buttons for A, B, and C, and this allows the target to make the choice by clicking either button A or button B or button C. Connected to these buttons would be 3 separate auto templates that you create for each one of those scenarios. Auto template A would be connected and triggered by button A. Auto template B would be connected and triggered by button B, and so on. And using this functionality, you can provide choices to your targets and let them click a button to make that choice. And by that simple click, they are initiating and firing an entire set of automations related to that choice. And then the other primary way of firing an auto template is by trigger logic, or what we call the dynamic logic engine. So as you see here in the auto template creation process, you can create an auto template, but you can also associate a trigger logic with the auto template. You can set the scope of who would be affected, meaning it can be all clients and prospects, or we can only look at specific circles if you like. And then you can make a series of logic rules that are related to things like values of custom fields or specific dates. You can create a logic that recurs every year on a specific date. It would be too much for this video to try to explain all the scenarios here. But if the logic returns a true condition, meaning all these logical statements are true, then the auto template will be triggered. And when it's triggered, it will fire all the automations that are associated with the auto template for the targets that return to true condition. So in this case, the logic engine is constantly scanning all of your targets or the subset of targets that you defined, looking at each one to evaluate if the logic statements that are in the trigger logic will return true for that target, and then it looks at the next one. Will it return true for this target? Does it return true for that target? And when everything lines up and we have a true condition, the auto template is triggered. So to be clear, this empowers 24/7 monitoring of your targets, looking for specific conditions based on time schedules and values of custom fields, etc. And it does this automatically behind the scenes without any input from you. And when it identifies a true condition, it will fire the automations associated with that for that specific target. Very, very cool. And the last concept to cover in this video is scheduled automations. And scheduled automations essentially gives you the ability to pre-package multiple sets of automations, and for each set you can define when it will be fired using relative dates, and then as we've seen, the relative dates are relative to a based on date. And the way this works is you create a schedule. Each schedule contains some number, up to you, series of automations, each one with a relative date. And then the based on date can be passed by, as we saw before, the value of a custom field, or it can be the date the target is added to the schedule, much like a drip campaign. Or even more powerfully, it can be a date that is passed uniquely for that target to that schedule by the platform. And this exists in several places in the platform, and we plan to extend this capability into more and more places of the platform. But the best example that you can use right now is in appointments. So for each individual appointment type, you can connect a specific schedule to that appointment type. And of course, for each appointment type, you will define your availability and create windows or time slots for your targets to book an appointment. So when you connect a schedule to the appointment type, when a target, let's call him target A, books an appointment slot, the platform will pass that day and time of that appointment to the schedule, and that will serve as the based on date for that particular target. And the platform will then individually and uniquely fire the automations in the schedule relative to the based on date that was passed for that particular target, which is the date of their appointment. So this means in the simple example that we're looking at here, if the appointment is 3 weeks away, then 14 days before the appointment, any of the automations assigned there will be triggered. Then 10 days before the appointment, those automations will be triggered. Then 7 days before those, and so on. And then you can have automations that are triggered after the appointment, etc., etc. So this takes the idea of a reminder sequence, for example, for an appointment to a whole new level, in that when they make an appointment out into the future, you can define both before and after automations that will happen uniquely for each target and uniquely for that target's appointment day and time. And these automations can be as simple as emails or SMS messages, or it can be triggering documents for signing or proposals or projects or whatever you define. And understand that you can change a target from one schedule to another based on your needs. So if you are trying to get target A to accomplish task X, whatever that may be, you may set a schedule that has a series of automations. Maybe they're email reminders for the first 2 or 3 or 4 weeks to help remind that target to execute that task. But maybe on week 6, you think if they haven't done it in 6 weeks, they might not do it. So then on week 6, you have an automation that changes them. It removes them from the current schedule and adds them to a different schedule that has more aggressive reminders maybe, or it emails a member of your staff and says this person has not completed task X. And also understand that task X can have more traditional automations associated with it, say the payment of an invoice or something like that. And you can configure those automations to remove the target from this reminder schedule so that they don't receive any more reminders to perform task X. So this is just one use case, but in this use case, you are empowered with the ability to create a very complex reminder structure that can manage itself in the case that the target does execute the task. And you can also build in a secondary fallback or secondary level of action in the case that the target does not complete task X in some reasonable amount of time that you determine. So you're creating your own structure here based on your own needs, and it's not limited to just emails or SMS. You have the power of all the automations that are included in the automation suite, which of course gives you a wide variety of options. Okay, so let's review what we covered in this video. We've explained what automation opportunities are and what targets are. We looked at generators, explained that functionality. We spent quite a bit of time examining based on dates and relative dates. We went over auto templates and discussed some of the use cases there. We revisited the click to trigger functionality for auto templates, and we took a look at the dynamic logic engine and how that works. And then finally, we spent some time talking about scheduled automations. So of course, this was just a review of the most important automation concepts. In truth, the platform is loaded with automation opportunities, and all parts of it are designed from the ground up to help you build the operating system of your business in a way that is as automated as it possibly can be. And we'll continue to build in that way with the goal of furthering our mission to help business owners around the world achieve #Suite Freedom by leveraging the power of systems, processes, and automations. Okay everyone, thanks for your patience and attention during this First Principles video series. I think this has been an extremely efficient introduction to SuiteDash and the important first principles that will serve as the building blocks for your knowledge as you go forward. We look forward to supporting you in your journey. Do the work, get your life back. We'll help you. All right, everyone. Thanks again. See you soon. Bye.